Biography. Bio, as in biology, the root means life. Graph, as in autograph, means writing, so writing about life. But autobiography, what idea does that add? Auto has nothing to do with cars. In automobile, what it actually means is self-moving. In autograph, it means writing self, writing your own name. So autobiography, writing about your own life. For example, A Son of the Middle Border by Hamlin Garland, which I spoke about just last week, is an autobiography. It's the story of someone's life. It can have rising and falling action. It can have turning points. It can have exciting scenes. A biography can be as enjoyable to read as a novel, and it's true. One humor group described him correctly, I think, as the only president of the United States who was never president of the United States. In other words, Franklin's name looms so large. He is so much up there with the other founding fathers, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Monroe, that it seems amazing that unlike those other great men, he was never president. The reason is that Franklin was only 2 years from his death when Washington became president of the U.S. He was actually already an old man at the time of the Revolution, and at the time that he made his name as a great diplomat, and as one of the few men, actually, who sat in on both the Continental Congress, thus signing the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitutional Convention, thus signing the U.S. Constitution. The introduction to Franklin is back in Unit 5, so please look at page 121 and 122, where you'll see some of the quotes from Poor Richard's Almanac that are among the most famous things Franklin wrote. Some of the ones I like: eat to live and not live to eat. 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. He that is of the opinion that money will do everything may well be suspected of doing everything for money. You can see that he created sentences that had a poetic sort of balance. He might say A is B, so B is A, and make a valid moral point by doing so. Obviously a clever man, but known in writing for the autobiography just as much as for the Poor Richard quotes. The Meet the Author says he was one of the most colorful and versatile of America's founding fathers, and that's certainly true. In addition to being an amusing and unusual character, he was versatile, meaning he could do many different things. Of course, he is famous for the flying the kite experiment that showed that electricity came from lightning. Did not discover electricity because it was known at that time. He invented bifocal glasses, which many people still use today. In the second paragraph, they mention what makes Franklin stand out most in our history, his involvement in politics at the time of the American Revolution and the founding of the Republic. He was an ambassador to France. He helped get aid from the French for the American colonies, without which there probably would not have been any American Republic. Ben Franklin's autobiography, which I have read in total, is also one of the great autobiographies in American literature. And it's up there with ones that, I hinted at this earlier about our book selection, that I wish had been in our book. Frederick Douglass's, Booker T. Washington's. These are all wonderful books because they not only tell the story of the man himself, but they use the story to make a point. They use the story to do what our book correctly says biography and autobiography should do. At the top of page 410 is a general introduction to biography. It says that the stories of the lives of other people are a source of interest and inspiration. Not only can they be exciting, as I've already pointed out, but they can mean something to us. They can tell us about how a great man or a great woman can be a model for us. History is but the aggregate of individual biographies. An aggregate means a conglomeration, group of things together. History is not the story of masses, of mass movements and economic forces. That's the way a Marxist would see it. To me, it is the story of individual people and those individuals working together to make things happen. The characters of those individuals, of course, are important. The morality and lack of morality of those people. And a good biography seeks to show us why this person was someone whose character we would want to imitate. Franklin was certainly highly conscious of that in his autobiography, and we see that especially in the section about moral perfection, which I will discuss later. The autobiography of Ben Franklin is a whole book. Our book takes only 3.5 pages out of it, so clearly they are really selecting the highlights. All they have as far as his life tells about how Franklin, like some other great authors in American history, like Mark Twain, started as a printer. William Blake, a great British poet, did the same thing. Started as a printer and then became a writer. In other words, in the days when people had to set type on printing machines, it wasn't so unusual a career decision to go from setting the words to thinking, hey, I'm going to write the words myself, and becoming a writer. Franklin loved books from the beginning, as it says, if you look at page 410. Pilgrim's Progress, which was a beloved book that was in every family's household in those days, led him to actually read, which is more unusual, everything by John Bunyan. He grew up reading practically everything in his father's library. He decided not to be a clergyman, which is a very common profession and certainly was then for someone well-read and educated. And he mentioned some others, but eventually what he did was he became an apprentice. This was common in those days, and I think is still a pretty good way for someone to get started in a job. So the apprenticeship, which really usually replaced a college education, was a good way for mostly young men to go out and learn by doing to find out what the job consisted of. Also gave someone a leg up on actually getting a job. If you did decently as an apprentice, then you could go into business for yourself, or you could continue working for that person. Along with that, I think one of the reasons this is one of the great scenes in American autobiography is it's so humble. It shows such a willingness to laugh at oneself, which is very important in a person's character, that it makes us like Ben Franklin and not think of him as just a very powerful, successful man who would look down at the rest of us. He came by sea. And a lot of people traveled that way up and down the rivers and the coastline of America on boats. Of course, there were no trains then. There was no easier way to travel by land. And so Ben Franklin describes this scene at the bottom of 411, right at the end of the first column. Thus I went up Market Street as far as 4th Street, passing by the door of Mr. Reed, my future wife's father, when she, standing at the door, saw me and thought I made, as I certainly did, a most awkward, ridiculous appearance. I'm not certain this really happened. It's just too perfect to have really happened, but it's one of the wonderful things about the scene. Here's Franklin with these 3 great puffy rolls. We have to imagine the size of these things. These huge rolls that he could not even carry in his pocket and had to carry them under his arm. So this young man just starting out in life, it's a lovely image of kind of a man's first independence, his walking into adult life, as it were, with these cheap rolls that were sold on the streets of Philadelphia. And he's actually got them under his arms and is trying to eat the other one. And on top of everything else, his future wife, whom of course he and she, God knew, but they did not know they were going to be married, thinks Look at that ridiculous young man stuffing that huge roll into his mouth. How silly he is. And then the other great thing in the story, what did he finally do? He was full up with one of them, so he gave the other two to a woman and her child. And so, of course, he is also not only showing frugality, the fifth of his moral virtues, waste nothing, and he didn't spend very much on the rolls. It's not like what you so often see in restaurants, loads of food left over uneaten on the plates when people have left. But it also, of course, showed generosity in that he was loving to those people in a small way, but the way God tells us to be, thinking, oh, I probably can't eat these other two rolls right now. I'll give it to them. It's a great little scene, and from it we move on to a discussion of Franklin's doomed effort to achieve moral perfection. Franklin begins this section on the right column of our page 411. It was about this time I conceived the bold and arduous, which means it will be hard work, project of arriving at moral perfection. I wish to live without committing any fault at any time. Hopefully your first thought when you read this is, good luck, that's not going to happen in this fallen world. Of course, St. Paul knew that when he wrote the great words about I know what I should do, but I don't do it. I know what I should not do, but I still do it. The only morally perfect man ever was Jesus. He said he had undertaken a task of more difficulty than he could have imagined, and he was right about that. It's certainly admirable how organized he was. If you look at page 412 and 413, this seems to be a man who did his best to use his time wisely. He got up at 5 in the morning, went to bed at 10. He would ask himself, I like this one, what good shall I do this day? And at the evening before going to bed, he would examine what he had done that day and ask himself, what good have I done today? He, however, most notably came up with this table that we see to the left of that. And what he did, these dots are not when he succeeded in doing these things, but when he failed at doing them, he would use the dots to show himself that he had not been successful and that he needed to work on that more often. This fits with the idea of the speckled axe, which Franklin explains on near the bottom of page 414 in the left column. An axe being turned on a stone, what that means is grinding the axe until it's nice and smooth and shiny, and the man got tired of it because it kept not being perfect, and the man said, I think I like a speckled axe best. And what he's saying is that many people found it too difficult to pursue the good, to give up the bad, and so they would conclude a speckled axe is best. In other words, the spots on the axe or the spots on our character, the things actually visualized as black dots in Franklin's table, people will often say to themselves, well, that's all right, I accept that. Actually, I even like it better. Starting with the first one, temperance, which we actually discussed last year because of the section about temperance. Also remember the vocabulary word with the root of temper, that's being moderate. Don't eat too much, don't drink too much. It's a good one. Silence is a good one, following that. Don't waste words. Of course, these are all biblical virtues, and we can probably find biblical lines that will support them. Things that Jesus said or that Solomon said in the Proverbs, or in the case of silence, I think of the letter of James. If I remember the words correctly, be slow to talk and quick to listen. And all of this is quite right. It's things that we should do. We could go over all 13 of the virtues, but that would take a long time. We'll conclude with Franklin's own concluding paragraph on page 414, where he says that he is 79 years old now and has had constant felicity, quite a life. That means constant good luck and happiness, and the blessing of God. because of what he calls this little artifice of his. And he concludes by saying that he hopes that some of his descendants may follow the example and reap the benefit. Once again, follow my example, learn from me. He's stating it directly. Normally in a biography, we'll look at the life of an illustrious man or woman and say, follow his, her example, learn from him or her. That's a lot of the purpose of biography, and that, as he states, is Benjamin Franklin's purpose here.